Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Sage 50 Cloud Pastel Accounting topic webinar. My name is Joanne Barnard, and I will be your panelist and host for this session. So guys, this session is going to be on emailing and printing tips and tricks. This is not going to be an in-depth, if you have email errors, this is how you fix them. Guys, we've done that webinar before. If you're interested in that, then you're welcome to go and watch the recording where we showed you if you get these errors when emailing, this is what you need to sort out. This is tips and tricks around emailing and printing. So while it may include some errors, we're not going in depth into emailing issues. Now guys, that being said, basically there are tips and tricks around emailing and printing. The first thing is that if you are using Office 365, you need to download the desktop version. You can't just use Office 365 and expect Pastel to be able to email if it's a web-based email program. So if you're going into your web browser to go into your Outlook, that is not the desktop version of Outlook. And the way that you see that is you can navigate to the control panel. And guys, you need to make sure that the programs are installed. So you need to make sure that you actually have installed Office. It needs to be the desktop version. Pastel itself is a desktop product. Although it is cloud enabled, it's still a desktop product. So guys, basically in your programs and features, you're going to double check that you actually have Microsoft installed. So you're going to have Microsoft Office installed or Microsoft 365 apps. So you're going to make sure that it is in fact installed onto your hard drive. And then from there, you will be able to, for example, open your Outlook, open Excel, open PowerPoint. That is when it's installed on your desktop. So you need the desktop version of Office 365 installed. You need to download and install it or your emails will not work. So guys, web-based products do not work with Sage 50 Cloud. So Thunderbird and Gmail and stuff, no. You have to actually have Outlook. That is what we test on. That is what we know works. So that's for emailing firstly, and it needs to be the desktop version. Then guys, when we're talking about printing, there are certain things that can happen in Pastel where you might get a really weird error. And the error that you may get is that a specific form that seems very odd doesn't exist. Now, when that happens, so you'll be told, for example, cxprd.enz doesn't exist. This is to do with the paper size assistant or the paper style assistant. And guys, basically what you want to do is you want to come in and make sure that this is set correctly. And even if it is correct, you're going to refresh it. So that means actually clicking paper style assistant, reselecting your options, and the options you have are plain, pre-printed, or header pre-printed. Now, plain is just A4 paper, blank paper rather. So plain means that there's nothing printed on it. It's just plain paper, pre-printed, means that, for example, you actually get it from a printer and it may have blocks or it may have certain things printed on it that you put into your printer and then it prints the invoices onto it. But Pastel won't create those boxes or the text because it will already have been printed on your paper. And then header pre-printed, guys, is where you've had your logo as well as, for example, the box and some text printed on the paper. Then when we come to whether it's single sheet or continuous, this is whether it's normal A4 paper, so single sheet, or continuous paper, which normally has the perforations in it, and it's on a ream. And you will just print 30, for example, invoices or statements, and then you will tear them off at the perforations. So you know what paper you're using. The standard is normally plain single sheet because most people just use normal A4 paper. and you will just reselect that. You will then say copy to all documents and copy to all tabs, unless you use a different style assistant for different invoices or for different options. So guys, please don't necessarily just tick this just because and do what I've said and not bear in mind that, oh, my tax invoices actually are pre-printed continuous. You need to know that if everything does use the same paper, then sure, you can copy to all documents, copy to all tabs. But if you have different paper style assistants, depending on what you are printing, for example, statements or suppliers, please then go and set it up one by one and make sure that it's set up correctly. Then another thing that is really important when printing is to get the paper size directly from printer. This may avoid you getting the error, incorrect paper size, paper style. Make sure that that's selected, but then guys, you also need to, in your control panel, make sure that the defaults and printers are set up correctly. So it's set to the correct paper size. If you are using continuous paper, you will need to measure it and create a actual form size. So you will set that up and go, this is the width, this is the height, these are the margins, whether it's metric or English. Most of us use metric though. And then you will give it a name. That's for customized paper sizes. If it's normal A4, guys, depending on your printer, because this is very dependent on the printer, you may see different options. You may also need to either go to properties or printing preferences. And guys, as you can see, this looks very different to if I'm using my PDF option. So guys, please understand that at times we can't tell you what you're looking for in terms of, oh, okay, click on a Canon. In the Canon, what you're going to be looking for is 1, 2, 3, because we don't know every printer, we don't know their setups. So generally what we'll tell you is go to printing preferences and look for anywhere where it's talking about the paper size. And please set the paper size correctly. So once you've done your printer serve properties, if it is a customized paper size, you will have to come here and then select that, for example, pastel layout. And guys, you need to check that on every single option. So like here, we can see it's plain paper A4, page setup, A4 again. So it was on quick setup, it was on page setup. So don't assume that because you've set it on quick setup, it just automatically will put it everywhere. Make sure that you set this up correctly everywhere. And remember, each printer is different. So that is really key, guys, is to actually get the paper size directly from the printer, but also to make sure that the printer is set up correctly. Now, another issue that I've come across is where you use one printer in Pastel, but your default printer is a different printer. Guys, often, if, for example, I'm using the Canon, but my default printer is to print a PDF, please make sure that you set up your default printer as well. Sometimes, for some reason, Pastel will specifically use the settings on the default printer and not on the printer that you've selected. This has been logged through to Dev. They are looking into it and they're trying to figure out why this happens. But generally, just make sure that all of your printers are set to the correct paper size. Now, in general, guys, most people use A4. So I tell them, look, in South Africa, we don't really use letter, we use A4. Just select all of your printers and make sure the paper size is set to A4. Unless you are using a customized paper size, in which case you will need to set that up. Then, guys, my advice would be make the Pastel printer the default printer. And when you're printing somewhere else, like in Word, select the printer that you want to use. But make sure all of your printers are set up correctly. This only applies if you have multiple printers set up. So guys, that can save you a lot of time and effort, just ticking that option and making sure that your printers are set up correctly. And this is when printing. Then guys, when emailing, as I said, what's going to save you the most time is making sure that one, yes, you are using Microsoft Outlook, and that two, it is the desktop version. If you're using Office 365, you still need to download the desktop version. Then guys, something that comes up is you might get certain errors on your customers or suppliers, and it's normally a runtime error 5, and when that happens, it's because you have not set the system to print an email. Now, this only happens now and again, but we found that if that occurs, go to the specific customer or supplier account and set it to print and email. Now, it normally happens if you just have this to print or you just have it to email, and then, for example, you'll try to print or you'll try to email. Instead of telling you you haven't selected the print option or the email option, it just spits out a runtime error 5. In that instance, setting it to print and email is the best option. Now, if it is set to print an email and you don't want to email, a lot of people have asked, okay, what happens if I don't want to email it then? Guys, in this instance, if you did have to process, and I'm just going to quickly get there, and to my knowledge, I should have a invoice. Guys, the moment I go here, it is going to try to do both, and you can just change it here and go, actually, I would rather just print, or I would rather just email. So you can do it from the screen if it is set to print an email, and you're like, well, actually, this time I just want to print. If you say print documents, it will not set that email out. So that is another tip. You can do it from there, and then it will just print it out. Then guys, when we're talking about printing and emailing, sometimes when you print to screen, you'll see that you have overlapping fields. And guys, unfortunately, I couldn't recreate this, but overlapping fields is where the text runs over 2 lines. Unfortunately, with Pastel, it doesn't go, oh, I have 20 centimeters and I need to break. What Pastel does is it goes, in this space, I can fit 20 invoices, then I break. And when it runs over 2 lines, it will run over your footer. Now, in order to fix that, you do need to normally go into your forms designer. Now, guys, a lot of people don't know if they have a customized form. If you are using the latest version of Pastel, which is 19.4.1, the moment you go to File Open, if you have a custom form, it should give you a message that tells you that. If you don't, it will look in the custom form section. And guys, then you need to open the form that you're working on. So for example, CS stands for Customer Supplier. Doc stands for documents, so like invoices, debit notes, return and debits. And then SP stands for single plain paper. So if you're using continuous paper, you're going to select C for continuous. R is for pre-printed. So you need to know the different acronyms. And then if you're looking in the forms folder, it will be an ENG, which means non-customized form. And you will open that up. So in this instance, what we're saying is, okay, I see the issue, but it's happening on, for example, my customer or my supplier documents. So either a sales order, a quote, an invoice, a credit note, or a quote, purchase order, supplier invoice, return and debit. That is where I'm seeing a print over. And guys, basically what you're going to do is you're going to click on the different options. The first thing to check is there something here that I can remove? Is there something here that I don't really need? For example, do I need the unit? And unit, by that we mean kgs each, meters. You know, do I need the unit in? Yes or no? For some people, that's very important. For other people, no. They're like, okay, I know it's each. I don't need this. They'll remove it. And then what they'll do is they'll highlight their two options and they will move them up. Because guys, the reason this is happening is because the box that is overlapping printing on two lines is too small. But you can't just grab the box and go over the other options, because what that's going to do is either shift everything up, or it's going to make sure that you are still you're still printing on two lines. So what you need to do is, one, select your options and make sure that it's got the little blue squares around it. You then, using your mouse, are going to go until you have an arrow pointing left and right, and you're either going to drag right to make it smaller or left to make the block smaller. And then again, on the one that you're trying to expand, you're going to either drag it to the left, depending on if you click on the top or the bottom, and to the right. So you're going to make that field bigger without overlapping on any of the other options. And hopefully doing that will mean that it's only printing on one line. However, when you save this, you need to make sure that you are saving it into the company folder firstly. So in this case, into the demo folder. And if you're saving it, for example, as CS.sp, I'm saving it as customer supplier document on single plain paper. But guys, when I do that, I'm only saving it if I'm printing to screen or printing to printer. If you are emailing your customers and they're saying this is happening, you need to save as again. And between what you are using, for example, the doc or the MTH, which stands for statement, and the paper style, which is the single plain or the continuous pre-printed, so the SP, the CR, you need to put in a PDF. That is for email, so CS.doc PDF sp.enz. And you save it again. And that will then allow it to make the same changes when emailing. So there are two types of forms. There is the print to screen and printer form, and then there is the email form. The email form always has PDF between what it is that you're customizing, be it the document or the statement, and the paper style. So guys, that's what you need to do. You need to expand it. This is also where you can come add your logos. You can add text. Again, guys, if you're interested in that, we did run a webinar on Forms Designers specifically. And I will show you where to find all those recordings. So guys, that is where you can go to sort out, if you have that specific printing issue. Then guys, if you get told that it's incorrect page size or paper style, generally that is where either you're not getting your paper size directly from the printer, so you did not save that. Copy to all documents, copy to all tabs, okay. Or on your printer, it is set to letter or A5, it is not A4. So that is where you need to go and check your printer settings, but do not assume that it's just the printer that you're using in Pastel. Another way to check this is also to change it. So here you can see this just says default, which means I'm using the default printer. You didn't set one up in Pastel. This is where I can also come and go, actually, I want you to always use this print to PDF. Now guys, here is where you see your printers and you can select them accordingly. So if it just says default, it means whatever printer default you've set up in devices and printers, that's what I'm using. So make sure that is set up to the correct printer. Make sure that printer's paper size is correct, and make sure you are getting the paper size directly from the printer. Once you've done that, you can OK. Now guys, something with this is a lot of people will go copy to all users. If you do that, I want you to read what comes up. Please note, printer font settings have been copied to all users. This does not include the paper style settings. So guys, if this was wrong and this is set to pre-printed single sheet, and you go and change it on the supervisor to plain and single sheet, and you copy to all documents, copy to all tabs, and then copy to all users, Jenny is not going to see plain single sheet if she's set to pre-printed continuous. It is still going to put Jenny on pre-printed continuous. It'll set her now to the correct printer and to get the paper size directly from the printer. But it's not going to change her paper style. Paper style is specific to users, and you have to log in as each user in order to set this. So please bear that in mind. Then guys, when we are talking about emailing, something that often comes up is to check your email settings. And guys, a lot of people, for example, tell us, hey, I need to know what's happening in Pastel because it's not sending my emails, and that's a Pastel issue. Guys, if Pastel is not giving you an error and it is sending everything to your Outlook, then Outlook has the problem. It's like where people go, I need an auto reply in Pastel to tell my clients not to email me. Pastel is the third party in this situation. Outlook is not the third party. Pastel is the third party. So you need to set your auto responses in Outlook, not in Pastel. Please ignore my emails, guys. This is just to show you, because people also go, oh, I've got 5 different emails and I needed to use this specific email. Now, guys, when that happens, you are going to need to go to your actual account settings, and you are going to need to see in your account settings, okay, which email address out of these 15 are set as default. So if it's sending from, you know, joannebarnard@sage.com, but I actually needed to send from supportsa@sage.com. And I've got both of those set up, so I want it to come from support, not from me. That is where I'm going to set the supportsa@sage.com as the default. So my Joanne Barnard will be what I use, but everything as my default. So if I send from Pastel, is going to come from supportsa or info@Barry's Traders. So I have Joanne Barnard at Barry's Traders, but I also have info and accounts. I can then set whichever one as the default program to use. And what that will do, or the default email to use, that will then send everything from that default email. So guys, coming into Joanne Barnard and going, sorry guys, it's not sending any of my emails from Pastel. No, it won't. You need to make sure, for example, that you are selecting the correct email address or email account that you want to use, and then checking the sent items and going, oh, okay, cool. Pastel is sending it from info. It's not sending it, for example, from Joanne. Okay. So guys, that is something that's really important. Again, in your control panel, when we're talking about emailing, it's important for you to set up your default programs as well. So you can go to large icons for that. And then guys, what you're going to do is you're going to click on default programs, and you're going to make sure that Outlook is set as the email default program. Short of that, guys, I then strongly advise that you please watch the webinar we did on this, where we show you certain options, reg edit options, but these are the default things that you need to set up. Outlook needs to be your default. You need to make sure that the email address that you want to be using is set up as default, and you need to remember that Pastel is the third party. If everything goes from Pastel and seems to be okay, then the issue is probably on Outlook. For example, I don't see my Pastel stuff in my sent items. My clients say they have it, but I'm not seeing it. Guys, this would be a setting on Outlook, and you need your IT engineers to look at the settings and make sure that they're allowing third-party access, and that they're allowing the third party to save the emails in your sent items. So that's really important. Then guys, back to printing. Often we'll get calls in with regards to printing and with regards to statements, where we'll be told that the statement, for example, is not showing all of the information. Either what we'll be told is that it's printing all of the invoice lines, not the totals, or that it is not showing any of the previous month's information. It just shows a total, and then it shows June, and the client wants to see all their transactions for the year. Now, guys, this depends on the setup, customer control, supplier control, and the statement option. Have you set it to always print in balance forward format? If you have, when you run your statements, it's only going to show a balance brought forward total and the current month's transactions and anything that's not matched. But generally, it's going to just show you June and a balance. Guys, it's really important that if you don't want that, you don't tick this option. So you need to understand the different print options here. Likewise, you need to understand the difference between print invoice totals on statements and print the lines. If you're going to print the lines, your statement is just going to show exactly what they ordered from you. It's not going to show invoice 5943, 10,000 Rand. It's going to show the line. So it's going to show they bought accounting software and then they did a consultation to have it set up. And then we also charge them for accounting fees. And they're going to go, okay, what invoice is this of? Okay, well, you had 3 line items in that invoice. So guys, that is the difference here. The thing is, if you go, oh, I didn't want invoice lines, I wanted totals, it's not going to work immediately. The historical information that you've chosen to print is historical. So it will only make the changes going forward. So if you've already updated your July batch, but you want July to show invoice totals, it's not going to happen. It's only going to show from August the invoice totals. So if your client's like, I don't want to see these lines, I want to see the invoice totals for January. Sorry, Mr. Client, I'd selected lines. I cannot do that for you. The best way then is to just do balance forward and tell them it'll look like that from August. But guys, we can't change the history. So if you did this up until, for example, now, the 31st of August, and we fix this, only your stuff that you process now going forward. So basically from now and the whole of September, December, etc., that will show your invoice totals. And likewise, if you're like, actually, I'd love to see the lines, it's only going to do it going forward. It's not going to change the historical information. Please bear that in mind. This tick, however, does change it from open item to balance forward, depending on whether the customer and supplier is balance forward or open item. So guys, if you have an open item customer and supplier, and you tick this option, it will make the statement balance forward. If you untick this option, it's going to make it open item. Now you might be asking, Joe, how come this is an immediate change and works on historical where this doesn't? And guys, the reason being is an open item customer has the history. You have literally told it, hey, this is the history, this is what I want you to print. And what happens is when you tick this option, it does not use the open item file, it uses the transaction file. When you untick this option, it uses the open item file. So you're telling it to read from 2 different files. This option, however, reads from the same file whether it's ticked or not, which is why we can't immediately alter the history. I hope that helps. So guys, that's depending on your statement printing and what you want to see. Then guys, if you are getting printing issues, a good rule of thumb is if, for example, you're printing something, you're trying the different solutions, you're going onto the KB, you're viewing the videos, a very good rule of thumb to rule out whether it's the printer driver that's having the issues is for you for example, to actually come in and change the printer that it's using. So you come in and you literally tell it, thank you, but no thank you. I want you to use a different printer. Again, guys, you can copy to all documents, copy to all tabs, and you can OK. But obviously, if you're not using a lot of different paper styles, and then you would print using, for example, the PDF and see if it now fixes the issue. If it does, it's your printer driver. That means that you need to uninstall and reinstall the printer driver. If you're getting the same issue on a different printer, then it's normally something in Pastel. And then obviously, guys, we can have a look. We can give you certain advices on that. So guys, to reiterate, setting up your printer font setup is very important. Making sure that the printer font setup is set to the correct printer, has the correct paper style assistance, and that it gets the paper size directly from the printer. You also need to ensure, if we are talking about printing, that we are going to devices and printers. See, I do this the other way and then I get confused, guys. So printers and devices, or is it just devices? Okay, so guys, sorry, I do things in a weird way. There's certain things that I do from large icons, and then there's certain things that I just do from categories. So here you can see view devices and printers, and I normally do that. And guys, making sure that obviously the printing preferences are correct for all of your printers, and making sure that the paper size is set correctly on all the different options. So that's really important when we are printing, as well as making sure for the customer and supplier accounts, you set it to the correct thing. But if you're getting a runtime error 5, just set it to print and email. And then when you actually go to print and email, you can select which one you want. Then guys, when we're talking about emailing, the tips and tricks were, firstly, ensure that your default programs are set up correctly, and make sure that if you are using Office 365, that you download the desktop version, because Pastel is a desktop application. It needs the desktop version. And then make sure that your Outlook is set for the email program accordingly. You also then need to make sure of your default email address that you are using, but you do this through Outlook and through the settings. If you have any other issues with your Outlook, you need to get hold of your IT, because Pastel is the third party, not Outlook, when sending emails. So a lot of the time people will be like, Outlook's the third party, where do I set it up in Pastel? No, guys, Outlook is the primary program in this instance, and actually Pastel is the third party. So account settings, if you're looking to set as default, and guys, the set as default only becomes available if you have multiple email addresses. And then guys, likewise, this is where you're going to have to come in, and you're going to have to, for example, manage your com add-ins, manage the account setups, and make sure that everything is set up correctly when we are referring to this. And they're going to have to make sure that the comms and add-ins are set up correctly. So this is where you come in, you're trying to make sure that it's correct, you're trying to make sure that it's set up, that it's not blocking third-party access. But Outlook is the primary program, where your Pastel is the third party. So here you can see the add-ins, here you can see admin changes. And guys, unfortunately, I'm not an expert in Outlook, so if I am going to the wrong place, this is where your IT needs to get involved. So guys, I think it's actually options that you mean to go in, and add-ins and trusted centers. but they will know what these are meant to be, they will know what they should be, and they'll know how hectic the security needs to be. It is very important that is set up correctly. And then guys, as we discussed, obviously we have done certain webinars on other things that you may be interested in. For example, Forms Designer, or for example, the specific email errors that I'm like, hey, if you get certain errors on email, we have actually run webinars on that. And guys, where you can find those links is you can go to sagecity.com, you can go to Sage 50. And guys, if it's underlined, this means that I've uploaded the video. So for example, email errors. This is the webinar that you can come and watch. And then guys, obviously I'm in the process of uploading these two. If they are missing, you're welcome to just email me and I will send you a link. Unfortunately, this one was started halfway through, so I may not be able to upload that. But guys, we can upload these different options. And once uploaded, these two will be clickable. But this is where you can come to click and to watch the recordings of those webinars. Now guys, does anyone have any questions around the tips and tricks that fall in line with the tips and tricks? Please send your questions through to me. I'm happy to answer them. As I said, this wasn't going to be the longest of webinar sessions. This is literally tips and tricks, things you can do to try to minimize the errors that you may get or to make sure that your system is set up correctly. Guys, if you have any questions, please send them through to me now and I will answer them to the best of my ability. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining me. Our next webinar is going to be on how to use the chat function and other platforms. Now guys, this is really important because we've had a lot of people getting really confused, especially with chats and even with registering when it tells you that Internet Explorer is no longer functioning. And people have gotten very confused with that and assume that it's an error on our side. I will go over that next week and we will talk about that and I will explain to you why that's happening. So please sign up for that. The one after that is unknown features. So we're going to go over things that people don't really know, like the payroll integration, Sage Capture, General Ledger Manager, making a company from a backup, your graphs. So guys, it's just things that people generally are like, hey, I don't really ask about these things, but there may be things that you actually want to use. So we're going to talk about those things on the 21st of September. So guys, I'm going to wait for your questions. If you don't have any questions, that is it for this webinar. I hope that you learned something interesting, that it was informative. And if you are interested in the full email errors and how to resolve those, please go check out that webinar that we ran last year on the 10th of November. Otherwise, guys, thank you for joining me. Have a wonderful week, a wonderful weekend, and hopefully I will see you next week when we chat about the chat function and why you keep getting told Internet Explorer is no longer being used. Thank you so much, and I will await your questions.